Hello, this is Joseph Jones with Group 35, here to brief you on Indoor Environmental Quality Pre-Requirement 2, Environmental Tobacco Smoke Control. The intent behind this pre-requirement is to prevent or minimize exposure of building documents, indoor surfaces, and ventilation air distribution systems to environmental tobacco smoke. This pre-requirement applies to new construction, core and shell, retail, data centers, warehouses, distribution centers, hospitality, and healthcare. The general requirements for this prerequisite, which applies to all projects with the exception of residential and schools, are that smoking must be prohibited inside the building, and smoking outside the building is prohibited except in areas located at least 25 feet from all entries, outdoor intakes, and operable windows. Smoking is also prohibited outside the property line in spaces used for business purposes. Signage must be posted within 10 feet of all building entrances indicating no smoking policy. If the requirement to prohibit smoking within 25 feet of the building cannot be implemented due to code, documentation must be provided, such as drawings and proper references to local code. For residential buildings, there are two options. The first option is to simply meet the general requirements listed on the previous slide. Or there is also the second option, which involves compartmentalizing the smoking areas if it is allowed in the apartments or certain areas of the building. For option 2, compartmentalization of smoking areas, smoking must be prohibited in all building common areas, and this prohibition must be communicated within the building lease agreements and discussed at signage. And smoking must also be prohibited outside the building, except in designated spaces located at least 25 feet from all entries, outdoor air intakes, or operable windows. As with the general requirements, signage must be posted within 10 feet of all building entrances indicating no smoking policy. And again, as with the general requirements, if the requirement to prohibit smoking within 25 feet of the building cannot be implemented due to code, documentation must be provided. Special to option 2, each unit of the building must also be compartmentalized. In the next slide, I will go into what exactly that means. To compartmentalize a unit, each unit must have all its exterior doors and operable windows weather stripped to prevent leakage going outside. All interior doors leading to common hallways must also be weather stripped. In order to minimize uncontrolled pathways for the transfer of smoke and other air pollutants between residential units, penetrations in the walls and ceilings must be sealed and along with all vertical chases, including garbage chutes, mail drops, and elevator shafts adjacent to units. You must also be able to demonstrate a maximum leakage of 0.23 cubic feet per minute per square foot at 50 pascals of enclosure. For schools, the requirements are simply to prohibit smoking on site, and all signage must be posted at the property line indicating the no smoking policy. Here is some step-by-step guidance on the general requirements of this prereq. Step 1. In order to determine the smoke-free locations, you must first obtain confirmation from the owner that smoking is prohibited inside the building. Residential projects may allow smoking in specific units with specific requirements, as was covered on the previous slides. In order to identify the smoke-free locations, you must also identify the location of all building openings, such as entries, outdoor air intakes, operable windows, and then identify the property line and the location of outdoor areas used for business purposes, both inside and outside the property line. And you should indicate these elements on the site plan, map, or sketch. Note that emergency exits with alarm doors do not qualify as building openings, since these will not be opened unless it is an emergency. Emergency exits without alarms do qualify as building openings and must be counted as such. Step 2 of this is to designate locations for exterior smoking areas. In order to do this, you will need to determine whether the project will have a designated outdoor smoking area. And an area such as this should be located at least 25 feet from smoke-free areas. Based on the information gathered from step 1. The 25-foot distance is a straight line calculation, just for reference. You should also consider design strategies that may encourage people to use designated smoking areas, such as covered seating or placing it in a shadier area, not just in direct sunlight. You should also educate occupants on the smoking policy and encourage them to self-police. This could be particularly important in retail situations. Ashtrays are also a signal that smoking is allowed in a particular area. Be sure that these are placed outside the 25-foot perimeter, though. Step 3 is to confirm that smoking is prohibited in non-designated areas. And to accomplish this, you should provide confirmation from the owner that smoking outside designated areas is prohibited in any space used by the building for business purposes, even if the space falls outside the property line. Examples of spaces used for business purposes include sidewalk seating, kiosks, and courtyards. And smoking must still be prohibited within 25 feet of building openings. I cannot stress this enough. Step 4, to determine locations of no smoking signage. Posting signage within 10 feet of all building entrances is required, though with the special caveat that schools must place it at the property line. It may also be helpful to stripe sidewalks to show the non-smoking boundaries if it is a crowded area and such signage can be easily overlooked. On this slide is simply the required documentation for each route you may take. The regular route for all projects with the exceptions of some residential and some residential projects. You can look over this documentation on your own time. This has been my presentation on Pre-Requirement 2. Thank you for listening.